Garamil Mahagat Tahirlig Ganivig, and would like to welcome the Minister, and also to welcome the departing students and visitors from the gallery, because it just struck me as listening to them. We're talking about a society that cares for everybody and includes people at all stages of life, and people at the other end of life, people who need nursing home care for various reasons. It isn't always possible for families to care for elderly loved ones at home. Care needs can be complex and so on. We have a duty as a society to make sure that we work to honour the dignity of our nursing home cohort in our population. On my way to Dublin and back from Dublin every week, I pass through the small village of Brideswell in South Roscommon, and there is, or I should say was, a nursing home there called Teach Bhríde, the closure of which was the closure of which was announced during the year. And indeed, I think that's one of about 16 closures that have already occurred this year. And I was reading what the Curley family had to say when they were giving that very unfortunate news. Of course, they pointed out that they had plans to extend to a 60-bed modern facility, but more modern facility, but they couldn't find a financial partner. And when you think of the consequences of that, for the people involved, and they would have been working very hard to find suitable alternative accommodation for their population in the nursing home, for whom I'm sure they cared very much. But the reality is that the disturbance and the upheaval for people at a time of life, when that's the last thing that should be happening to them, is very much to be regretted. When you think of the consequence of having to move perhaps from being in a nursing home in your own local area to maybe a big town like Athlone or a bigger place like Roscommon, near enough still, but far enough maybe to mean that the visitors will be fewer or that the visits will be less frequent. And that's before we talk about the job losses in the community and so on. So I think we have a vested interest, not just for the people in the nursing homes, but for our communities, and particularly our rural communities, to look out in particular for those smaller family-run nursing homes. We live at a time when there is an understandable push towards centres of excellence in all sorts of areas, including in medicine, and it can make sense to have larger congregated settings for certain kind of things. But the human touch must never be forgotten, and I think that many of these family-run nursing homes have been exemplary in the care and individual attention that they give to the people living there, or living in their nursing homes. So I have been in touch with Nursing Homes Ireland, with Tig Daly, and they're very honest in their briefing, in that they say, look, there is nothing wrong with seeking to make a profit with running a nursing home. It is a business. That is how we get things done. We give employment, etc., etc., etc. But he does rightly point to the discrimination that there has been there between the funding of public beds within the nursing home sector and the funding of long-term care beds. In 2019, you were talking about 23,000 long-term care beds, of which about 4,600 were public beds. That's around 16%. Now, as I understand it, around 30% of the funding was actually going to that public bed sector. That if you calculate the spend per person, then those in an occupied public bed, that their beds were being funded to the tune of 692 per week more compared to the funding of beds in the private setting. Now, one of the arguments that has been made about that in the past has been that there have been more complex care needs involved for people in the public beds. Now, this point is refuted by Nursing Home Ireland, and they cite the Department of Health Value for Money report, and the quote from it that I have for you today, Minister, is that it has long been assumed that public nursing homes have a larger cohort of higher dependency higher complexity residents than their private sector counterparts. This assumption is based on anecdotal evidence only, as there is no single assessment tool used to determine the individual care needs of residents in nursing homes. The study undertaken as part of this review attempted to test this assumption. It found no discernible difference in care needs between the sectors. Now, that's the Department of Health's own value for money report. So why is it then that 16% of the beds would be getting 30% of the public spend? And when one considers as well that, you know, the argument has been made, of course, that sometimes there are extra services available in public nursing home facilities. But these extra services are funded, as I understand it, from the community care budget. In fact, the differential is to, in terms of funding available, is to the disadvantage of the private sector, because they have to pay the capital costs, they have to pay commercial rates. The public facilities do not. They may also, of course, be dealing with bank repayments and loans. And I cited the example of Bridewell, where it was the inability to get a financial partner for the purposes of developing Charm and Vrija for the future that led to the closure of that home there. So I think there's a real issue here, Minister, that the question has to be asked, that, you know, with no doubt as to your personal goodwill, mustn't we ask, why does the government appear to neglect smaller private nursing homes at the expense of larger public funded ones? Look, in terms of the funding, yes.
Neglect. You used the word neglect.
Well, I'm not talking about the neglect of persons. I'm talking about the issue of neglecting the financial needs, if you want to be.
We'll all address the chair.
No problem, because I'm delighted to give clarity. Yes, neglecting the financial needs. If you fund one sector advantageously compared to the other, then by definition you are neglecting the financial needs of the lesser funded sector. I'm not accusing anybody of neglecting people at a personal level, but there is consequences. There are consequences to underfunding, and there is a funding issue around nursing home care. So, you know, looking at the figures another way, Minister, the HSE nursing homes receive an average fee per resident that's 60% above that payable to private and voluntary counterparts. So look, I know from my own experience and my own family experience, we were very fortunate to be able to care for my late father at home, and that was something very important to us. But we benefited hugely from the support of private nursing home care when it came to respite care, where my father was very tenderly cared for. So I don't speak out of any vested interest other than the interest of personal experience and the observation of what is available to people. So that, I suppose, is the core point, and I'm conscious that I've run out of time. But I would ask you, just in conclusion, Minister, just to I suppose to continue to consider that the issue of funding for nursing homes isn't just a matter of treating every patient equally in terms of the envelope of money that's made available by the state. It is also about supporting and protecting community-based facilities in our country for everybody's benefit.